This is Optimal Health Daily, episode 271, Why You Should Never, Ever Give Up, Part 1, by Deen of JCDFitness.com, and I'm Dr. Neil. Hello, happy Monday, and welcome back to Optimal Health Daily, where I simply read to you from the best health and fitness blogs for free. I cover fitness, nutrition, stress management, weight management, and more, just like an audiobook, but I read from a bunch of different authors. And then on Fridays, I answer your questions right here on the show. Now, today is the last day to vote in the podcast awards. You're allowed to vote only once a year, and it was happening all this month. Since we have multiple podcasts in the health category, we're trying to get our very first podcast, Optimal Living Daily, lots of votes. So if you like this show and want to give some free support, come vote for Optimal Living Daily in both the People's Choice category and health category. The shortcut link is oldpodcast.com/vote. And I'll give you a quick reminder at the end of the episode. So for now, let's get right to today's post and start optimizing your life. Why You Should Never, Ever Give Up, Part 1, by Deen of JCDFitness.com. I remember the very first time I wanted to give up. The air was thick as mud, and my olfactory nerves were being incessantly pounded by the smell of freshly cut grass with every breath I furiously fought for. I thought I was dying, but in reality, I just never exercised before. I was fat, out of shape, and my favorite meal was a bologna and cheese sandwich with a large bag of Doritos. I'll never forget the other kids running laps around me during my first ever football practice. I was ashamed, confused, and disappointed that I just wasn't cut out for athletics, as I began to believe before the practice had barely started. I had to sit out the rest of the practice because I couldn't catch my breath after one lap around the field. Once it was over, one of my football coaches approached my mother and said, quote, "Miss Deen, I'm afraid little JC isn't going to make it. He couldn't even think about keeping up with his peers. We think he may have a bad case of asthma, and you should probably have it checked out before he continues." End quote. I'll never, ever forget it. She stared him straight in the eyes and said, quote, "That's BS. He's just fat and out of shape. He doesn't have asthma, and he'll be here every practice no matter what." End quote. I was only 10 years old. As we approached the car, I was so excited to be done and seeking shelter from the pain and embarrassment. I remember sitting in the living room begging her to let me quit. It just wasn't fun, and all that running really hurt. She said, quote, "No, you've started something, and you're going to finish it. Even if you have to suck wind the rest of the season, you are not a quitter." End quote. A 10-year-old boy really has no say with regards to these matters, so I ate my bologna sandwich, a few Doritos, and went to bed. My first lesson in discipline. The next day, I woke up in dire pain. I'd never ran more than 50 yards in my life. My entire body ached, and I was cursing this game of football under my breath all day long at school. All of my peers were excited for practice, but I wanted to ditch it. But guess what? Mother Bear was my ride, and she was sure I'd be there. Ugh. So I show up again at this dreaded practice field. We began the conditioning work, and I remember just how much I wanted to evaporate into thin air. My brain was constantly telling me I couldn't do it. I didn't have it in me. Such atrocious thoughts persisted for about 2 to 3 weeks, but with every practice, the little voices inside my head dissipated. I began to keep up with the skinnier kids and actually started to develop some athleticism. Over time, going to practice became fun. I even began to excel at something I'd never really attempted before. I was becoming quite the football player, even if I was only 10 years old. Before I knew it, the season had ended, my pudgy figure had begun to transform, and I had a newfound confidence I'd never had before. From this point on, athletics were a major part of my life. Day in and day out, I continued to push the limits. I competed in any sport I could, and while I didn't always excel, never fast enough for the track team, and couldn't stay interested in baseball, I was always competitive nonetheless. I learned through hard work and perseverance that you could overcome what sometimes seems to be the impossible. The reason I continued to succeed. It took me a while to figure it out, but one of my high school coaches said it best. Quote, "It's okay to be less talented than someone else, but never, ever let yourself be outworked." End quote. But in reality, there is really no such thing as talent. People just spend more time than others on whatever task at hand. I used to get this all the time, in school, on the practice field, in my extracurricular activities. People would say, "Oh, you were just born with this talent. It comes easier for you." I used to believe it, but then I began to think about what my coach was saying. I'd worked really hard for where I was and where I was going. For those of you who are regular readers, if you've been here from the beginning, you know I started JCD Fitness back in October of 2008. Rereading some of my older articles makes me sick to my stomach. My writing style and ability has changed and improved drastically over the last 2 years. Many might find it hard to believe, but I'd never written much more than a typical freshman English paper when I started this website. I knew nothing about writing style or getting a message across through article form. All I knew is that I wanted to share my experiences about health and fitness. So, without knowing much about what I was doing, I just started writing. I remember being so self-conscious about my writing, having my friends and mother proofread each post for me so I wouldn't feel like an idiot for publishing something that wasn't perfect. But over time, I started to get the hang of it. I'll never claim myself to be a great writer, but I do believe I'm a great communicator, something I've worked very hard at since I was young. My whole life has been about building relationships. Writing is just one way I get to practice communicating. So, what's the point? I'm not really afraid to fail anymore. I'll continue to use JCD Fitness as an example, but I have many other ideas I could throw out there. When I first began publishing, I was so afraid of what others would think, what they might say about me or my philosophy on fitness. But one day I woke up and stopped caring. The only way we learn is by doing and taking action. I wrote a few articles that flopped. So what? I wrote some more that got attention. Maybe I wrote some things that weren't too politically correct. Maybe it lost me a few readers. Perhaps I stepped on a few toes. Most people will pack up their bags at the very first piece of hate mail they get. Goodness, I remember how emails poured in during class right after I published the first clean eating article. After reading some of the stuff I did, most people would have stopped publishing altogether. To be continued. You just listened to part 1 of the post titled, "Why You Should Never, Ever Give Up" by JC Deen of JCDFitness.com. We'll hear the rest on tomorrow's show. Now, I could relate somewhat to JC's experiences. When I was younger, I had no interest really in playing sports. My parents also forced me into it, so I played baseball and soccer for most of my childhood years. I hated practice, I hated the competition, but it did get me into shape. It laid the foundation for what I am now. I hated every day of it when I was younger, and my parents would tell me, "Trust us, you're going to thank us later." And sure enough, I am thanking them now. But boy, would I cry, would I try and ditch practice, ditch those games, but because my parents were ushering me to games and practices, I had no other choice. Once I got burnt out on soccer and baseball, I actually started to become interested in other sports. I began swimming competitively. I played tennis for my high school. And just like JC, started to explore other things like weight training. And the rest was history. So yes, I too would have liked to have given up a long time ago. And I too am very grateful that I didn't. Now before I go, don't forget podcastawards.com is open to the public for voting, but closes tonight at midnight. You can vote in any category, but we'd love it if you'd vote for Optimal Living Daily in the People's Choice and Health categories. It'd really mean a lot to us. The shortcut link is oldpodcast.com/vote. Thanks for doing that in advance. Thank you for listening and being here every day. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow where we'll finish up this post and where your optimal life awaits.
Hello, Life Optimizer. This is Justin Malik, creator and producer of this show and Optimal Living Daily, the brother podcast of this one. Literally, I'm Dr. Neil's brother. If you like the format of this show, you'll love Optimal Living Daily too, where I also read to you from blogs, but cover other topics like personal development, finance, and minimalism from bloggers like Derek Sivers, The Minimalists, Zen Habits, and many more. So for more amazing content read to you for free, come subscribe to Optimal Living Daily too, and together we'll optimize your life.
You've been listening to Optimal Health Daily. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on each new episode, and head to oldpodcast.com. That's oldpodcast.com for a free gift, as well as more actionable tips and resources to help you maximize your potential. Thanks for joining us, and remember, your optimal life awaits.